Welcome back to the Archive Network. Aurelius here, with Malik, curators of the Civilization Archive. We left Viking civilization last time at Yet. Even as their influence reached its height, new dangers loomed on the horizon. Today we pick up where we left off. Before the world knew their name, the Vikings were already watching distant coasts and sharpening their axes. By the summer of 793, they were ready to make their mark. The attack on Lindisfarne wasn't just another raid. It was a declaration of intent. It was the spark that ignited the Viking Age across Europe, a time when fear and fascination would intertwine, and the whispers of their longships would become a haunting melody on the horizon.
But let's not forget what came before that fateful day. The Vikings didn't just show up out of nowhere ready to raid. Their society was built on centuries of seafaring tradition and exploration. Families spent generations learning the skills needed to navigate the seas. The raid at Lindisfarne wasn't just a random attack. It was the culmination of years of ambition, dreams, and preparations. Every boat launched carried the hopes of people looking for something more, something beyond their shores.
True enough. But the immediate impact was profound. Chronicles describe sheer terror and confusion among the monks. In that moment, every coastal community in Europe suddenly realized that the North was no longer a distant, quiet place. The Vikings were coming, and they had arrived with a fury that shook the very foundations of civilization. We can see how this invasion forced societies to rethink their defenses and alliances, reshaping the landscape of power across the continent.
And yet, those first raiders were just the beginning of a much larger narrative. This wasn't just about one isolated incident. It signaled the birth of a new era. Raids evolved into full-scale invasions, yes, but they also brought about profound transformation. Communities were uprooted, lives changed forever. The Viking world was shifting rapidly, both on land and at sea, impacting countless individuals, altering trade routes, and forever changing the stories of those who lived through it.
The age of longships is an apt description. Their ships were remarkable creations, sleek, fast, and brilliantly designed for both open waters and shallow rivers. We see this in the ship burials unearthed at Oseberg and Gokstad. These vessels tell us they had a sophisticated grasp of engineering and purpose, reflecting a culture that valued both mobility and power. Each ship wasn't just a means of transport. It was a statement of their strength and ambition.
But let's not ignore the human cost of this transformation. Those shipwrights were not just artisans. They were part of a community grappling with turmoil. The push for innovation came from ambition, sure, but it was also fueled by conflict. Picture it, the scent of pine tar, mixing with the acrid smell of smoke and blood. Families were torn apart, and lives were lost, all in the name of progress. We owe it to them to remember their struggles.
A valid point. The internal power struggles among chieftains were significant, to say the least. In Denmark, Godfred fortified the Dannevirke to protect vital trade routes. This wasn't just a defensive move. It was a strategic response to the rising chaos around them. It really showcased the urgent need for centralized authority during such turbulent times. When threats loom on the horizon, we see leaders stepping up, recognizing that unity is essential for survival in a fractured landscape.
Centralization came at a real cost. Leaders like Godfred had big dreams, but those ambitions often overshadowed the needs of everyday folks. The villages that once buzzed with life were now at risk. They were being swallowed up by towering fortifications and the desires of a few powerful figures. Families who had lived there for generations suddenly found themselves squeezed out, their voices drowned out by the clamor for power. It's heartbreaking to think about what was lost.
Ambition has always been a catalyst for change. Just look at the Viking warbands that invaded the British Isles and beyond. They didn't just bring destruction. They unleashed new opportunities and forged connections. The graves of those warriors, filled with weapons and treasures, tell tales not only of fierce battles, but also of the spoils that followed. We see this cycle repeating throughout history, where every conflict also sows the seeds for new beginnings and uncharted territories.
However, rioting was just part of the story. The Vikings didn't merely take. They settled down and demanded tribute from the communities they encountered. Their presence reshaped the core of coastal towns, forcing people to adapt in ways they never imagined. The Vikings were not just raiders. They became settlers and rulers, influencing local customs and governance. It wasn't just about conquest. It was about how lives intertwined, creating a complex legacy that's still felt today.
And with that new wealth came significant societal changes. Chieftains began rewarding loyalty with grand halls filled with treasures from across the known world, showcasing their power. The thing evolved, too. It transformed from a simple local gathering into a formidable assembly. Now it was a space where laws were debated, alliances were forged, and leaders displayed their strength. This shift wasn't just about power. It was about establishing order and control in a world that was rapidly changing.
Yet, these changes were not without conflict. The rise of new elites often sparked rivalries and fierce struggles for power. Some settlements fell, left to ruin in the chaos of civil wars and internal strife. Families were torn apart, and communities that once thrived found themselves in despair. Viking society was forged in conflict, shaped by battles just as much as by the warmth of feasting halls where stories were told and laughter echoed, reminding everyone of what was at stake.
By the end of the 9th century, the Viking world had transformed considerably. They were no longer seen solely as raiders. They'd become settlers and rulers across vast territories. But with power came challenges. New dangers loomed on the horizon, threatening their hard-won influence. As they expanded their reach, they faced rival factions and shifting alliances. The core of their society began to fray. It's a reminder that growth often invites conflict, and the stakes have never been higher.
That's where we leave it this time. Viking civilization continues. The story isn't finished yet. Find the full series on the Civilization Archive, part of the Archive Network. We'll be back with the next chapter.